Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Roundtable orientation for the opera Dead Man Walking. We have the cast here with us today, and we're going to introduce them in a minute. But before we do that, I want to welcome Betsy Dowling, president of the Women's Guild, who's going to introduce her crew, who are the chairs of today's event.
Well, that's right. We have now for a couple of years tried to have the menus correspond with the opera. Now, Dead Man Walking was a little tough. But people have done it. I understand it's going to be better next year. But in the meantime, my cooking crew is Ann Duffy, Kate Burke, who also happens to be my daughter. We keep this thing.
Linda Ibert.
My neighbor. Give a big hug because you're going to get a fabulous dinner.
Thank you very much. And the chef that really cooks is Linda. Well, we're going to say that some of it is prison food, and some of it is a whole lot better than what is the prison food? Yeah, well, Kate's going to talk about.
Actually, because it's a South Louisiana, based on a South Louisiana story, we have crawfish etouffee, which is, for many of us is our favorite South Louisiana dish, with salad. But I've been doing a lot of research to find out what prisoners eat on their last meal, and amazing numbers of them want fried chicken, garlic bread, fried fish, pizza. So we have a lot of things like that for little tidbits. But no, not bread and water, and not, strangely enough, not steak, nothing gourmet. Kentucky Fried Chicken is probably the #1 item on last meals.
Did you see the article in the newspaper, and I've forgotten who wrote it, about how much the state, which is in terrible debt, could save 600 and something thousand by going vegan? What about their last meal? And they also emphasized in it, it would also say because no refrigeration would be required.
He said if we didn't put the
Thank you, ladies. Thank you, ladies. Thank you, everybody. Okay. Today's roundtable, for many who have been to the roundtable before, know that usually what we do is we walk through the storyline of the opera. Well, this opera is, the storyline is it begins with the man who is in prison. Actually begins with the crimes being seen on stage, and it goes through his relationship with Sister Helen and ends with his death. The process, however, getting there is to introduce you to all of the real emotions and thought processes behind everybody involved. So before we get into that, we're going to start with the other end of the table. I'm going to ask each of the singers and artists to introduce themselves and tell you what role they're singing and a little bit about their history with this role.
I guess I'm first. My name is Jennifer Rivera. Call me Jenny. I'm singing Sister Helen, and this is my third time performing this opera. All the times have been with him, so we're used to each other now. I said at the previous dinner that we had, it's a very unique, special honor to be here in Louisiana doing it, since this is where Sister Helen is from and this is where the story takes place. It's also a lot of pressure because, we want to do it justice. We want to do her justice and her story justice. I feel very strongly that this opera, and you'll hear this, probably we'll all say the same thing, that this opera is a masterpiece, and that it's both musically and dramatically a masterpiece, and something that needs to be seen by everyone. So I'm just thrilled to be a part of it and thrilled that we're here doing it for you.
Are we going to be impressed by your costume?
Probably not impressed. If you are, we're doing something very wrong.
My name is Michael Mays. This will be my 8th production of Dead Man Walking. I've done Joseph 5 times, and I've done the motorcycle cop and the prison guard as well. So I've had a long, about 12-year history with this piece, and absolutely love it. It's unique. This production is unique, and of course that we're doing it here in New Orleans. And it's rare as opera singers that you meet anybody upon whom your character has had an impact. And we're doing this show here where this entire community and state was impacted by the crimes of 2 men which make up the amalgam of Joseph Desrochers. And so for me, I said this the other night, there's no doubt in my mind that in that audience out there will be somebody who was touched by this story in a very personal way. And that's only happened to me one time before, when I did a show called Glory Denied, where the family of the longest held POW in American history, I played his Colonel Floyd James Thompson. I played that character, and his family was actually in the audience. And I can tell you from that experience and from the one we're about to have here, that there is nothing like the energy that participation gives a production like this.
Which role do you play?
I'm sorry, I play Joseph Desrochers. He's the character. He's the dead man who walks.
My name is Adrienne Danridge, and I'm singing the role of Sister Rose. This will be my 2nd production. The first production I did was actually, he was the motorcycle cop.
That's right.
So it's so great to see him grow into the big boy. My character is very conflicted. I am a nun. My character's a nun. And I feel like my best friend, who is Sister Helen, is really misguided. She has forgotten her immediate surroundings, and I feel like my job is to keep her grounded in now. We have children that we're dealing with here. These are the facts. He killed this kid, he killed those 2 kids, and you need to worry about these people that we're surrounded by now. So it's really kind of an interesting journey for my character, because in the end, I basically counsel her, Sister Helen, to make sure that she forgives. She personally, she doesn't talk about God or Christ, but that she personally forgives Joseph. And I feel like I have come to a journey where I actually begin to not necessarily identify with him or condone his behavior, but I feel like my character starts to feel like I need to do some soul searching for myself, that I need to learn how to forgive a little bit more. And even though I have the title of nun, I'm not perfect, and my journey continues to become closer to God and closer to forgiveness for myself.
I'm Thomas Voulon, and I'm the stage director for this. I'm happy to be back in New Orleans. I was here 3 years ago for a completely different show, Madame Butterfly. Both of them don't end well. But this is my very first Dead Man Walking. I've been obsessed with this story because I knew the story before I knew the opera. When Susan Sarandon and Tim Robbins and Sean Penn did the movie back in the 90s, I watched it as a young man. And then I discovered the opera and wanted to do it ever since, and we've been talking about it for the past 3 years. And when I got familiar with the opera, it struck me that it's even more powerful than the movie, it's even more powerful than the book. And in our last conversation, I said that I believe that when words are not enough, music comes to take it over to another level, and that's why this piece is so powerful to me. It's very unique to do it in the area where it happened. And we have some of the most incredible cast I've ever worked with. We just came back from a run-through of Act 1. And it was such a powerful experience because this music is music that reminds me of some of the greatest composers in history. It's melodic, it's powerful, it tells a story. And what the story and the libretto grasp that not a lot of modern opera grasp is that melody is not a bad word, that a balance of tragedy and comedy, that comic relief is very important in moving a story forward, and most importantly, that scenes need to move from moment to moment in a way that is unstoppable, because we live in a world that is very visual, and our attention span is limited. This is why I'm going to be shorter than I want, because I could talk all night. But what's great about this piece is that it moves so fast from moment to moment, and it just never stops until the end. And the end is not great. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Okay, Robert Lyle, and I'm conducting the productions. That is my...
That was fast.
I bested Tomar in being brief.
I'm Kathleen Hom. I'm playing Jade Boucher, the mother of the murdered boy.
And I'm Amy Frimmer, and I play Kitty Hart, the mother of the murdered girl. And for those of you who are fearful of going to a contemporary opera, I just want to tell you the music is very beautiful. There are lots of tunes that you will be able to grab onto. You'll be able to understand everything as it's in English. Be sure that there is something for you to. Don't be afraid.
Well, that is a good point, though. We've talked, many of us, about the beauty of the music and the line of the music, but in my opinion, I think that the brilliance of this score is in the libretto. I think that Terrence McNally, the way he has set these words, the way that he's used them against each other, is simply brilliant. I'd love to hear some of your own personal thoughts on things that have really jumped out to you in the words for this show.
I can tell you right now that I think, let's see, 1, 2, 2 of us, 2.5 of us are parents, right? Right, Jenny and I are the only parents. Doing this role is my worst nightmare. And when you sing the words, you don't know what it's like to imagine. What it's like imagining your baby being killed and you're not there. It's very real, and it's very beautiful, and it's an honor to be able to do this.
What's interesting about that, though, is that there are many operas where Azucena is child. Yeah. I've never heard an Azucena be moved like that. What makes this different? Why is this so real?
Because I'm literally saying, you don't know what it's like to imagine the terror and the fear, my poor baby.
It's because it's one of the things about contemporary American opera, when they're really well done, that is so amazing, and we're just having a renaissance right now of exciting American operas. And there's something about, it's like opera audiences have been kind of living in the past for a long time, and then musical theater has gone forward, and we've had all of these musicals, that people have really related to. There's something about the power of an unamplified voice, accompanied by an orchestra with incredible music, but in a modern, idiomatic English dialogue. So it's like it has all of the power of a play or a movie, in the same way that if you watched, the movie Dead Man Walking, you had that feeling, all of the feelings that come with that. But then when you add this element of an incredible score to that, and singing this music and expressing it through your voice, there's just something that's very, it's unique and it's very deep. And so, I think as to your question, opera, often has that power to really affect people because of the power of the music and the power of the human voice. But when you add a contemporary story with words that you're connecting to, and the second that they're said, immediately, and it's modern and it's something that has happened recently, there's just something beyond even the power that you've experienced in other operas, I think. And that's why it's so effective, and that's why we certainly hope that everybody will come and fill the theater, because experiencing it together, something like this, is kind of a once-in-a-lifetime thing. So
I think that also, we just came from a very, very emotional Act One. I am still crying, literally, like when you started crying, I started crying. We were commiserating in the rehearsal hall, and we weren't singing at all, we were just listening. It's an immediate story. It's something, you know these people, you see these people walking down the street, you are these people. And so you don't have that distance like you would if you were if we were doing Don Giovanni, and I was doing the Countess or what have you. I am not Spanish, and right, she's Spanish, right? Am I right? I just had to make sure, I am not Spanish, and I didn't live back then. But excuse me?
Did Reggie live back then?
I don't know if Reggie lived back then, but I do know that the empathy is the biggest word that I can think of when I think of this opera. We talk about forgiveness, we talk about love, we talk about hate, but to be an empathetic person and watch this particular show, you will not come away from it unchanged. You will be changed, is a better way of saying that. You will be a changed being. And just going through the rehearsals, and the words that I sing they affect me, of course, because it's my character, but the words that she sings and the words that he sings, especially the words that Joseph Desrochers sings, touches me in a way that I never thought that I would, as Adrian, myself, really relate to this guy. Kill him. But the way he talks and the way he sings the words, excuse me, this is so emotional. Anyway, I'm gonna shut up before I embarrass myself. It really is powerful.
The piece is about the humanity, is about an individual person's humanity. And it's captured extremely well in the way that it's written and in the way that it's created musically. It's just a very perfect portrayal of the humanity of a human being and all of the different characters. And that's why it's so powerful.
One of the interesting things about the way that Terrence and Jake approached this story is that we see in the very first thing you see is a very graphic depiction of the crimes that happened, and you know what the crimes are. And you know immediately that my character is the guy that did it. We waste no intellectual or emotional energy on a courtroom drama in this piece. We know he's guilty. And the way this is staged, you will think this man is a monster. And whether or not you support the death penalty or not, I'm sure if you polled the room, there'd be a diversity of opinion on that subject. But whether you are for the death penalty or against the death penalty, this piece does not take a position on that issue. This piece is designed to show, like Jenny said, the humanity of these people, and not just to make you feel sorry for this guy that did this. It's not that. The idea is for you to see the humanity of all these people and understand the loss, not only of the victims' families, but of the perpetrator's family. Sister Helen uses great imagery because she's a nun, and she speaks about Christ's hands stretched out on the cross, and she makes the analogy that over on one side you have the victims' families, and they've had their loved ones ripped out of their lives, and that leaves a hole that cannot be filled with anything. No matter what you throw into that hole, it's there till those people then die. But also, on the other hand, you have the perpetrator's family, and they didn't kill anybody, but they also lose somebody. And the idea is for us not only to understand that the humanity of Joseph and the humanity of Sister Helen and Sister Rose and Joseph's mother, but to see the humanity of all these people and how it affects them all. And I can tell you right now that if you are for the death penalty or you're against the death penalty, you can walk into this show and walk out with the exact same opinion you walked into with. Because Jake and Terrence absolutely made sure that nobody would go say this is some political hit piece. Because we see the very real pain of the victims' families. You see it in Technicolor. So this, I like to say often that this piece does not preach, it does not take a position. It only asks the question, what is it that you believe with respect to this very divisive issue? What is it that you believe, and are you sure? And you could leave answering that affirmatively or negatively, either way.
Does anyone know what Sister Helen, how she sees this opera?
She loves it.
She has said that she thinks it's the most powerful depiction of her story that she could imagine, because, as Tomer said, the music adds an element that is not comparable to any other depiction.
And on that point, she said, you know, when Jake approached her about the piece, she said, "No, I don't want none of this boop squeak music. I want to be able to walk out that theater humming." And you will.
I want to take a moment to introduce Maggie Lattimore.
Sorry, I got lost.
Maggie's with us now. Maggie, would you tell us a little bit about your character and your history with her?
Oh, okay. My apologies. I got turned around. I'm Mrs. DeRoche. I'm the mother of the convicted felon, and probably a very simple means. And she's had 2 children after. She's had both Joseph and his brother. His brother is also in jail, but he got life in prison. So the two of them have perpetrated this. The two of them have perpetrated this crime. So anyway, I'm there for whatever reasons to humanize him in a way. Obviously Sister Helen does that as well. But I think so much about this piece, and we're talking about what it's about. I also see I see us as I've said it the other day in rehearsal, as a culmination of our choices. All of our choices make us who we are. But if you see the world as like a calm pond, every choice you make is like a rock in that pond with concentric circles. And what this piece shows is that a choice that 2 people make, the many, many people it affects, not just the 2 victims who died, but their parents and their siblings and their aunts and uncles, and then of course on the convict side, on the Joseph side, how many layers does it go? Does it affect people? So I think it also, I believe it is about a woman's humanity, and in a way about the death penalty. But I also, I think about these characters and the choices they make and how it affects the world. And then from there, what choice do we make to handle them? And do we give them the death penalty or do we not?
You mentioned the opening scene. Now, Robert and Tomer, there's a very delicate balance with this opening scene. Would you talk about that scene with us?
Well, by way of introduction to whatever Tomer would share, I want to further a point that Michael Mays was making, because I met Sister Helen 15 years ago and have gotten to know her fairly well. And she's an amazing person, a person of amazing convictions and a uniquely articulate point of view about the subject that she addresses. What she said to me when I met her and we were talking about her opera was, I loved the way it was handled in the opera, because the movie became kind of a murder mystery. And that is 2/3, 3/4 of the way through it, you as the audience are saying, is it possible that all of his protestations of innocence might in fact be real, that the brother did it and unfair justice applied and so forth? And so she said that way the audience can see, as you say, we know from the downbeat that Joseph de Rocher is guilty, and whatever universe he has created for rationalization and denial is patently false. And she loved that because, as she so beautifully expressed it, then the audience joins on the journey that is the centerpiece of this opera. Sister Helen sings her great aria very early, in which she talks about, and I won't take Jenny's text, she can express it more eloquently, but this journey to God, this journey to Christ, this journey to truth, this journey to herself. So, the placement of that murder scene is very, very critical, I think, to what this piece is all about. Because we're not, as you brilliantly expressed it, Michael, not presenting a courtroom drama in which opposing points of view are presented about what happened. All of that is played out in the mind of a person that we actually saw commit the crime. And then, Maestro, let me turn it over to you.
So I want to start by asking why we are attracted to opera. Why is opera so appealing to us? And I will start by answering that there are many reasons for it. It's a combination of so many different art forms, of movement, of music, of theater, of scenery, of costumes, blah, 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 blah. All those things are coming together. And there are different styles of operas. The best operas, the ones that are most effective and profound, are operas that tell you a certain truth that is powerful, that is universal, that appeals to you whether you grew up in Louisiana, Israel, New York, or India. And what's really great about Dead Men Walking is that it strips down everything else and focuses on truth, on human emotions, on parenthood, on relationships, on faith. And that connects to the question. The first scene is about finding the truth of that event. And in conversation with Jake Hagee, the composer who I adore, I told him that when I listened to it for the first time, I kind of imagined the scene happening behind the script. That it's kind of like veiled and it's like a memory. And it happens in Sister Helen's mind, in a way. And I still feel that strongly, but he said, just make sure that the horrors of that event are very clear, that the truth of what happened there comes across, the shock of it. And that's what we try to create in that first scene. It's not pleasant, it's as close to the truth as we can find.
And without that scene, because the opera would still be a good opera without that scene. And that goes back to the genius of those two, and not trying to get political about this piece. They were very dispassionate about telling the story. If you don't show, because people think, well, it's just so violent, it's just so, I don't really want to. The problem is, if you do not show the horrific nature of that crime right off the bat, then the first time you see Joseph, one might actually have the impulse to feel pity for him off the bat, because you don't see what he did. And that's like a lot of times in our culture now, where violence is often, we're also like to use a bad pun, like beaten over the head with graphic violence in movies and film and television. This is an instance where the inclusion of a very graphic scene, it has a very noble and justified purpose.
I want to take kind of what you were just saying, Tomer, add that, go on with you, Michael, about truth. And I'm hearing kind of from everybody today about the reality of bringing the truth of your character out. And for you, how difficult that was. Michael, can you talk, and I'd like to hear from everybody about the reality of the difficulty of bringing these characters to life, particularly for you.
Well, I grew up in East Texas in a trailer, and very poor area. We weren't desperately poor, but we weren't rich either. We were sort of lower middle class growing up. My dad worked for an oil company. I know so many Josephs in my life. I know my neighbor was a Joseph, my cousins that were Josephs. It was just these men who are so crippled by circumstance or by their birth or by whatever, that lack the ability to express this torrent of rage that's inside of them. I know these guys. I was victimized by these guys growing up, so I know them. Playing a rapist is it's one of the hardest things you could ever do, because I don't care how disconnected or detached you can make yourself from a situation. The things you're doing on stage are happening, and they're in your eyes and in your mind and in your ears. And the first time I did this show, it absolutely blew up my life, because I'm not the kind of singer. I mean, I'm an actor first. I'm glad I get to sing, because singing just gives me the ability to act. That's why I sing, only because I'm able to tell these stories. And so you take it home with you, and it absolutely haunts you for months after I did this show. I mean, the young woman who had played the victim was so good and so committed and so fearless that I couldn't get her voice out of my head, the things she would say. It's easy to let those things get confused, and the more I've done it now I've done Joseph now 5 times. This is my 6th, and every time you do it, it gets a little easier, but it never gets easy.
I just want to add to that the real benefit for the people in the audience is that these singers are allowing themselves to become that naked emotionally to be able to bring this to life. Because if they weren't allowing themselves to become that real and that connected, you wouldn't get the effect and you wouldn't get the performance that you're going to get. Would you talk, Jenny, a little bit about your taking on Helen?
Sure. The first time I read through the score, I have a child. So there's a big scene where the parents, in real life, I have a child. There's a scene in the opera where the parents of the murdered children are saying to Helen, the one that she was talking about, you don't know what it's like to have a child that you lose. And, So when I first was reading through the score and I got to that scene, I was like, can't look at that right now, because I was absolutely related to the parents and not at all relating to Sister Helen. And I was like, that's right, Sister Helen doesn't know. She doesn't know. I know, And I have to say that is one of the most incredible honors as an actor, to have to find something that is so opposite of how you feel in true life, and to find the impetus of this person who you have no direct connection to necessarily, and who you may have the opposite opinion from or the opposite feeling from. I mean, it's not the same as what he's doing, but it's kind of the same, because I was coming from a completely different perspective, and I had trouble with it. I had a lot of trouble with it, and I'm glad that I've done the show now a few times, because now I can get through it, and actually sing. The first few times, staging some of the scenes, when it's your first time in the opera, which it is for a couple of these people, it's an incredible challenge, because it's very immediate, and you have a very distinct connection to what you're saying, and to what the other character is saying to you. So, but at the same time, I have an enormous amount of respect for Sister Helen, because I just think that she is such an incredible human being with this light inside of her and this unbelievable, unshakable determination in the face of constant turmoil. She's constantly facing obstacles, whether or not you agree with her mission in life. She is constantly facing the most unbelievable obstacles, and continuing and overcoming them. And that, in a human being, is just an extremely admirable quality. And so, you know, I have not actually physically met her yet, and I'm supposedly going to meet her at some point this time. Everyone says, so I'm waiting. But I did talk to her on the phone before I did it the first time, and we had this long phone conversation, and she just comes through the phone. She's just so vibrant. She's just like she's there. And she told me that she has such respect for those of us going on this journey in this opera because she believes that we are experiencing a lot of the same emotions that she experienced. And I thought to myself, how can you compare singing an opera to going and sitting next to someone and watching them being executed? I mean, but she feels that. And so I felt through that conversation a very deep connection to her and to want to tell the story. It makes you want to tell the story in an even more committed way because you have this person that has continued this journey, you know, through all obstacles. And here we are as singers, like, oh, I got a bad review, you know? And like, you have this person who goes through these unbelievable challenges and continues. And that is just one of the most inspiring things I can imagine as a performer trying to bring something to people, is having that person as a role model. So, you know, it's incredibly difficult and it doesn't get easy, but it does get more, I think we become, you know, a little bit desensitized to it enough so that we're not constantly breaking down after every rehearsal once you've done it a couple of times. And that's how, you know, and also, but you find deeper connections to the piece every time you do it. Mike and I have done this show together now 3 times, and all of, you know, we have all these scenes together, and we find new things every rehearsal, every performance. I think we've done 16 or 18 performances or something like that, and it's like every time you find something new. And so, you know, having that combination of that and being here in New Orleans, it's just it's a very powerful experience.
I want to take on that step there, and we have mothers from both sides here, and Maggie has not to speak about it yet. You missed the emotional.
You missed me bawling.
Yes. The mothers of the victim. Now, what happens though is that you have the mothers of the victim saying you don't know what it's like, and then you have the mother of Joseph saying with the exact same music and very similar words the same thing. You two of you are coming from completely opposite sides, though. So talk a little bit about that whole scene with you.
Well, we had an interesting conversation in rehearsal the other night, and you know, talking about how you can't judge a character. You have to be very honest with it and come to it, you know, as open as you can. And, you know, for lack of a better word, you know, all our bags are packed. We all come with baggage. So the challenge, and as Jenny said, you know, if this is somebody that you don't really have much in common with, you know, what's your in? How can you find your in there? And I have a little boy, he's 11 years old, and the idea that I would have to sing years down the line, you know, you don't know what it's like to have failed a child. You know, the idea of failing my own son is so devastating to me that I could ever possibly allow that to happen. And so I've struggled initially, you know, and I kind of mentioned that I didn't see her as this incredibly sympathetic character without judging her, but just saying that you know, she made choices. And so the connection I was able to make to this woman was that she ends up having 2 other children, 2 boys, and you'll see them on stage. And you know, she can't even hear him, you know, she can't even hear him say, Joseph say the words that he's done this. She's like, I mean, it's not la la la, but like, how could she function if on some level, some conscious level, she really knew that she had produced 2 rapists and murderers, you know, or like a rapist and a murderer? How do you function? And so, you know, we talked about this cognitive dissonance, that we can find a way to like line things up. So like, he's still a good boy. He's my boy. He's a good boy. That's how I see him. That's how I will always see him. That's how I will be able to function. That's how I'll be able to be a mother again, and hopefully do better this time. Because, you know, initially I really kind of struggled, and I was so grateful for those other 2 boys that she has these other children to live for. Because all I can say, I mean, I think I said to Adrienne the other night, I mean, I couldn't live with myself. I mean, I just, you know, I don't know. I don't know if I could live on the earth knowing that I had produced that. But now that she has 2 other children, that she has a chance to not fail. And so that's sort of the in I kind of found. I don't know if that answered your question.
That's very, very well.
It's a very interesting angle too with the mother, that she's not equipped like all of us in this room, by nature of just being opera fans or performers. Like, there's a certain level of education, a certain level of of economic freedom and stability that these people do not have. She's so limited that the word dyslexia is a challenge, even for her to pronounce. So if you think about somebody who has these limitations, also raising these sons who are abused by their stepfather, and I mean, there's all these angles and elements that you understand that a lot of times. I mean, it's a part of a larger discussion, but economics and culture and things like education, all these things, it's easy for, we often say like, well, that was a bad mother. She should have known better. She should have done that. But the fact is, there's so many factors that go into producing people that end up becoming criminals and breaking the law, that it's such a very complex social and cultural issue.
But I will speak to that in that whatever your economic place in the world, or whatever you know or you don't know, the nature of mothers, of being a mother, the idea that she would allow her children to be abused by someone, that she would choose a man over her children. I don't know that has to do with economics or race or anything.
It could have a lot to do with the way she was raised, the way if she was a victim of abuse herself.
Sure.
And if there's often recidivism, but not in the way that's like somebody who commits a crime over and over again, but somebody who is a victim of abuse. They are so much more likely. I mean, as a child, they're so much more likely to ape that relationship later in life. And you see it happen. I've seen it in my own family. I've seen it in the family people around me. And yes, I mean, I would love it that if my neighbor was a different guy, and I love it if his mother would have treated him better. But she just wasn't equipped. She didn't have the tools. And
I want to say something.
I disagree.
Well, I know her.
You're not a mother.
I'll introduce you sometime.
Hard for you to
I want to say something. First of all, those two individuals have a birthday today. Both of them. So happy birthday to Michael and happy birthday to Maggie. But I also want to say that those discussions are so fantastic because it's such a powerful subject and every person has a different point of view on it. To me, as somebody who just discovered a few months ago that his wife is pregnant, one of the reasons that this is so touching to me is that I feel very strongly that once you have a child, and I think it was President Obama that said, you take your heart and you put it out and then it goes. Mm-hmm. And you don't know what it's going to happen to your heart. It's that vulnerable. And for me, that's what connects me to all the characters. All the characters have that heart that is out there. And some of them get hurt along the way.
I have one more question, I think, for everybody, and this may not be applicable. Do you find, particularly those who've done it before, doing it here, you said a little bit about this, Michael, doing it here where it is local, do you think it has changed the way you see your characters, or it has made you think about the way you do them differently, knowing that there are people in the audience who know these real people who are affected by the real emotions?
I would speak to that as definitely, but one of the things I've always loved about New Orleans, I've never worked with the opera, but I've only worked with the symphony, is that in my travels, I have found it to be the most unpretentious major city in America. And as an example of, and I don't know if this goes along with what you're saying, but like you have like the Four Seasons Hotel and then you have a tattoo parlor next to it, you know what I mean? And I love that, and even though there are like, I'm sure there's class, I'm sure there's a caste system as well, but there's a lack of pretension here that I've always really appreciated, and in all the people that I've met, and so I'm so looking forward to this audience coming with that openness that I have found here in my experiences. And I wasn't just like, butt kissing, I really mean it. plus your food, I mean, come on.
Do you want to add anything to that?
Go ahead.
Well, I mean, I live here, and one thing that has concerned me, and Robert and I talked about this when he originally had announced that the opera was doing the piece, and he talked about the controversy of the piece and the controversy of the death penalty. And I'm Catholic, and I sing at St. Louis Cathedral, and I was thinking, how is this going to be received, and how will I'm doing a supporting role, so I'm not playing, I have something to say in the opera, but I'm interested to see how it will be received. I think it's really interesting that the opera company is also doing a CLE for attorneys, so that, and it's free if you're an attorney.
Can't anyone go to that?
You will get CLE credit if you have a ticket. If you take your ticket to the opera, to the CLE, you will get credit for it. It is free, however, for anybody to go to. Yes.
You might not have a need for a continuing legal education credit. But it might be interesting for you to see and hear, see the differing points of view.
I hadn't thought really quickly, though, of the towns that it's been in, because I was raised Irish Catholic. This is probably the most Catholic town.
Probably so.
Like the audience is going to come with an understanding of so much of what she's speaking about.
I think even Sister Helen recently in an interview said she was eager to see how it was going to be received here. Let me generalize a little bit here in that I've heard the comments over the last week from my colleagues, and I think perhaps there's a little bit of pressure by doing it in New Orleans, where Sister Helen has based her life's work, and the Order of St. Joseph to Medea is still here and very operational, forces us to think in terms of a kind of authenticity. And that is, yes, that the people that are familiar with this event and familiar with the culture and familiar with Sister Helen's many speeches, but that we could present a drama in which the person viewing it would say that is very real and it is true to its history and true to its circumstances. The worst thing I think that we might do is for us to present some part of a drama, and I think between the experience of the cast and the brilliance of our stage director as well, that no one will sit there and say, that just doesn't resonate, it doesn't feel real, or it wouldn't have happened that way, or something like that. So I think that has informed the discussions, and as you can see in rehearsals, sometimes the discussions get to be pretty lively. There is also a little bit of a danger, I think, of trying to refract every thought and action through second-guessing what Sister Helen thought or what Joseph de Rocher thought, because we have their words, their testimony, impressions of their personality available to us. And so I think you have to pay obeisance to that, but at the same time, this is a creative art form in which there is not one absolutely fixed, and Michael, you might jump in and comment on this, but not one absolutely fixed method to do this, or everything has to exactly duplicate everything else.
One of the great things about this piece is they don't use people's names from the story.
Right.
And I think that's a really important choice, because one of the things about the death penalty is, in order, this is a perfect punishment. It is the ultimate punishment. So in order to carry this out, you have to be 100% sure, and we do know in this country we've put innocent people to death. We know that's a fact. So in order for that process to take place, you have to have lots of appeals and appeal and appeal. And when that happens, the wounds of these people are opened up over and over again, and they're never allowed to heal.
And that horror is
absolutely
ongoing.
Just it's a kind of hell on earth. Now, what's great, what they did in this case is remove that the horror of having your family member's name sung in an opera over and over again. You don't have that problem with this piece because these people are made up. They're not real. I mean, they're not. It's influenced by the stories of these two men. And Sister Helen is the only real character in the show. Everyone else, and that's why it's a story more about the general subject of this rather than a very specific instance.
And just quickly to speak about the idea of the connection of people who've been affected by the story being in the audience and how that affects the performance. When we were doing this in Central City, for example, we had in Colorado, we had a lot of talkbacks afterwards where people would come back and speak to the cast after the performance. And there were people who would come who, whose sister was murdered by someone, but they still opposed the death penalty, and so it was very specific to them. This opera meant something to them, and that already, just having people who are affected by the death penalty alone, it gives an enormous. There's something very, it's not like any other opera that we have this direct connection and this direct kind of line to the audience because we're talking about something that is happening right now in our culture, in our country, in our lives. But that is amplified by so much because of the people who actually live in these communities who are affected by these crimes. And that's why it's so important to do it here. That's why it's so difficult to do it here. That's why everything, all of those things rolled up together make it a very important and special and necessary experience for everyone involved.
I just have one thing to say about Michael mentioned that being an actor first gives him the ability to sing. I tend to feel the same way, but the other side of that is when we go on stage, we are not acting. We are that person. So you put on the robe of Sister Rose or Sister Helen. There's not a lot of movement just because we're singing. We sing and we speak just like I'm speaking to you right now. If I'm going to say that, I'm going to look at you, I'm going to talk to you, I'm going to shake my head or do whatever, but that's a real movement. That's not some kind of grand gesture because we're doing opera. We are real people. And I made the mistake or spoke, I said I. And I was like, no, my character. Because when I speak of Sister Rose, I am Sister Rose. And I think that when we take Adrian out of the equation, when we take Michael out of the equation, when we take Jenny or whoever out of the equation, you get Sister Helen, Joseph Desrochers, Sister Rose, etc. Because we are able to become those real people that have been affected by this story.
I'm being motioned by the ladies that we need to end this because we're already past time and they're ready for you to come over. I want to thank everyone here. I'm sure we're going to go across the other room. If you have questions, thoughts, or maybe things that you would rather talk to one of the artists individually, one-on-one, they're going to be here for a few minutes, so say hi, ask your questions of them. For everybody here today, I want to thank you for being as open as you were. I think this is by far the most open roundtable we've ever had here.
Yes.
And I think that this is going to be because of that, a really amazing opportunity for this company. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.